questions from anybody? Yeah.
Would you agree that World War I was the result of many misunderstandings and mistakes? People blundered into it, and it should never have happened. Consequently, it would not have led to World War II.
Yeah, I think so. Our methods of communication, slightly after the turn of the century, were not very sophisticated. So it was slow for the publicity to advance across the nation. It was slow for people to be able to react. The layers of government that we currently have that have compounded things to smother it on this end of the spectrum were not there. But yes, it was a misleading of the people of America. It was a misrepresentation. And yeah, if World War I didn't occur, certainly World War II would not have occurred. Yeah.
I thought it was interesting in reading today, I found out that Hitler's medal was awarded to him by a Jewish officer.
Was it really? So he just said Hitler's medal was awarded to him by a Jewish officer. Yeah.
I wonder if you've given any thought to the extreme longevity of the survivors of World War I?
Yeah, I have reflected on that. Interestingly, Mr. Buckles' famous quote is, "When you think you're going to die, don't." so that was one of his famous ones. Yeah, it was interesting to look at that. I've got a cousin who's a gerontologist, doctor in Washington, D.C., so him and I have had some conversations about that. But yeah, there were some longevities. And what we did with Mr. Buckles was the same approach that they did with the last three in England. So fortunately, with the grandson of Henry Allen, the last British, he talked with me about how to extend the life and help keep them living, so to speak. So when we got to Mr. Buckles and I became his public relations person and person who helped him, what we tried to do is pace out events so he would have something to continually look forward to and move towards to help keep his mental focus going. And the other thing that he constantly did is he did exercise every day, even if it was a 2-pound barbell. He would exercise every day, and he would read every single day. Towards the last year of his life, he couldn't read because his sight was so bad he would have someone read to him. But he continued to degrade in the last year of his life to where he was probably only awake for about 2 to 3 hours a day. So, yeah, yes.
Again, wonderful presentation here. Why do we learn history? We look around this room, there's a whole lot of us with some history and gray hair. But particularly for younger people, and perhaps your son, why learn history? We're a nation that moves forward.
Yeah, history is critical. The famous quote is, "We learn history so we don't repeat the past." In doing my research, I constantly stay on top of the editorials and the op-eds and things that come up. And there's an op-ed that just came up about our memorial cause in Washington, D.C. And that person said, "You would have to be a sociopath to want to create a memorial to any of the wars." And that was the person's statement. And I actually emailed him and I said, "I'm not a sociopath." It is about, one, it's about honor, but two, it's about recalling your history so that you don't replicate it again. And we're starting to see paths and courses of that as we approach the 21st century. And it's shifting in a giant and dramatic way as the advancement of knowledge, as the advancement of communication, as the advancement of publicity or information trickles through the filters of Twitter and Facebook and whatever other source it evolves or devolves into. We're going to see at a very rapid pace a very challenging and dangerous situation of expansion of things as it grows for this nation. So, yeah.
I like the quote from John F. Kennedy's book, title which was Memory of a Nation. He said, "History is the memory of a nation."
That's right. Yeah, history is the memory of the nation. So, right behind you.
You very briefly spoke of the polar bears, Michigan's own. In and the cemetery in Whitechapel is dedicated to those people. But many people don't know that the polar bears fought for 6 months after the war was over. And some of their biggest battles were in 1920, after 1919, after the war was over. My dad was in them.
Was he really? Well, there actually are discussions. There's apparently still some American bodies from those polar bear units in Russia that they're talking about building a memorial to as part of the Centennial Commission. So that's in discussion down the line. So, yeah.
Our Causeway Park up here, which at one point was called the Michigan's Most Beautiful Mile. But anyway, it started as a memorial to the First World War, and then it's been added on to many times by, the Second World War. But the fountain at this end of it, the southern end of it, there's this pretty fountain which is now relit again with colored lights. But the granite arms that kind of surround that fountain were donated to, Muskegon County by the French in thanksgiving of our rescuing them from disaster. And the French, not the ambassador, but somebody from the French consulate came up for the dedication of that in the early 20s, mid to early 20s. So the French were very grateful to us, and they reached into a small community like Muskegon and donated the money to build these, granite arms surrounding the fountain there.
The Europeans it's alive to them. Sadly to say, it was the French and the English that extended and offered help to the Buckles family first when Mr. Buckles died. So, but yeah, you're absolutely right. They continue to this day. Both the French and the British embassies held high-level receptions for Mr. Buckles to honor him before he passed on. Yeah.
When I visited George Petropoulos, one of the polar bears, he was 102. He had the polar bear statue in his yard at his mobile home. There are 2 of those statues in Muskegon, and people should know what they're about.
They should.
The Causeway and one of the posts on the road, Airline Highway, has that same kind of statue.
Yeah, they should know.
People see it and they have no idea what it means.
Yeah, that's right. So, yeah.
You mentioned that in World War I there was no Iraq, there was Mesopotamia, and there wasn't any Iraq until England created about 1920, drew the line and said, we're going to take these 3 people, the Shiites and the Sunnites and the Kurds, who hate each other, and we're going to call them a country. And they still hate each other. And there's still no country.
That's right.
The problem is at first sight.
Yeah.
He's on.
That's right. Yeah.
Were there any books written about that prison camp you described in the Philippines?
Los Baños is called the Great Raid.
The Great
I believe it's the Great Raid, yeah, or the Los Baños Raid. So it was incidentally the same day as the flag raising over Iwo Jima. So it was overshadowed by the great photograph, I think it was by Rosenthal, of the flag raising. And so typically you'd see that flag raising real large above the fold, and then at the bottom you'd see something of, I think it was 2,900 and something civilians rescued. But it was absolutely just incredible rescue. Yeah.
Just where in the Philippines was that prison camp? Do you know?
Los Baños, and I'm not totally familiar with it geographically, so I don't know.
Was it Lakey or Luzon?
I think it's near Lakey. Yeah. So where were you at?
I was in Luzon, Subic Bay.
Okay. Yeah.
We was in there for a couple of, about 3 weeks.
Plenty of time in the Philippines, right? Anybody else? Yeah.
Was that a particular prison camp, was that strictly Americans, or was it, because there was a British
Yep, that was
civilian prisoner of war?
the camp that, yeah, the Los Baños prison camp had many nationalities in it.
So it's probably the same one.
Yeah.
This morning, after hearing how hard it has been to kind of get things put together for World War I veterans, is there anyone looking at doing this for the World War II veterans, so when we get to the point where you are, as you get towards the end and you start to look at that, is there any way that they're tracking that any better that you find?
Yeah, World War II. I worked with the Library of Congress Veterans History Project in Washington, D.C. And their collection of World War II stories numbers into the 50 to 75, 100,000. Their number of World War I stories is less than 5,000. World War II has the benefit of being very well documented, unfortunately. Okay. Anybody else?
Thank you, David, for having a very insightful lecture tonight. I'm sure everybody enjoyed it. I want to have one more recognition, because without this person's efforts, she's kind of the wheel that supports some of our wild ideas. Kathy Posa, would you please stand up? This is our department chairman of the corporate finance. Next week, we have another lecture. It's about the Blitzkrieg. Now, obviously, we'd love to see all of you back. But in order to keep the lights going and the heat on, we're going to pass a little jug. And if you have an extra $1 or $2, would you please drop it in? Because these museums do not operate for free. You know, it takes a little bit to do this. So if you're a community member, please, by all means, support this entity and tell your friends about this lecture.